There's a specific feeling a lot of people carry, but almost never say out loud. You're doing okay. Not great, but okay. You're working. You're not making obviously terrible decisions. You think about money, probably more than you let on. And still, there are people around you pulling away financially in ways you can't quite explain. It doesn't feel like luck. It doesn't feel like raw intelligence. It feels like something behavioral, like they're running different software under identical conditions. This video is about what that software actually looks like. 7 behavioral patterns, not habits, not tips, the kind of thing that's nearly invisible while it's compounding and only obvious years later when the gap has already opened.
A lot of people don't actually want wealth. They want the feeling of being someone who could have it. Those are different games with completely different behavioral profiles underneath. Thursday night, someone's on their couch, phone up, not watching anything in particular, just scrolling. They've been there 2 hours. They didn't plan it. They just ended up here. Again. Nobody built modern life to protect your attention. That's not a conspiracy. It's simpler. A lot of smart people built products optimized for engagement, and your long-term focus wasn't part of the brief. That's it. That's the whole mechanism. And over years, it trains people to need the noise, to feel uneasy in silence, to read stillness as falling behind. You can see it in people. The low-grade restlessness, the phone that comes out at every pause, the inability to sit in a car without filling it with something. When constant stimulation becomes the baseline, long-term thinking becomes genuinely uncomfortable, physically uncomfortable. And that shifts every financial behavior that follows from it. That's the environment. Now here's what certain operators, certain long game players, do inside it. 1. They treat attention as the productive resource it actually is. Right now, somewhere, someone is in a room that doesn't look impressive. Laptop open, phone face down across the room. They've been working on one thing for 4 hours. Nobody knows. There's nothing to post about it. It won't look like anything for another 2, maybe 3 years. Across town, someone else has been online all day, responding, reacting, staying visible. Their notifications confirm they exist. One is building an asset. The other is maintaining a presence. Both feel like working. Only one is. Long game operators don't have more willpower. They've built their environment so that deep focus is the default, not something they have to fight for every morning. That's the practical version of this. Architecture, not character. Though honestly, even the people who figure this out still get pulled in sometimes. They're not immune. The pull is the same. They just recover faster, mostly. 2. They've made peace with feeling financially boring. This one sounds easy. In practice, it's strange to live inside. People who accumulate over long periods tend to have an almost clinical relationship with financial events. Numbers go up, they don't celebrate. Numbers drop, they don't spiral. A deal falls apart on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday, they've recalibrated. Not because they don't feel it, because at some point, usually traceable to one specific decision, they made an expensive emotional call. Bought from fear, sold from panic, held something out of pride long past when they knew better, and they paid for it in a way they can still feel years later. That payment is the discipline, not personality. Emotional volatility is a financial cost that never shows up on a statement, but it compounds exactly like everything else, just in the wrong direction. Some people become financially successful and still feel anxious all the time, checking accounts at 1 a.m. for no real reason, refreshing numbers that haven't changed, building things and still not feeling okay about any of it. Nobody mentions that part, but it's common, and it matters.
3. They stopped buying relief. Watch what happens to people when income goes up. A lot of them, not all, but a lot, within 6 months. Better apartment, newer car, nicer dinners. Things they earned, things that are completely defensible at the new number. And somehow, every single year, life feels financially tighter than the year before. You can see it sometimes. They look successful. They look exhausted. Those two things together on a face have a very specific quality to them. Some people spend 20 years optimizing a lifestyle they quietly can't sustain, checking the bank app before ordering at dinner, pretending not to look at the price, posting something that signals things are going well on the same afternoon they're stressed about an invoice. The spending is almost never really about the thing. The car is a feeling. The watch is a story told to someone from 15 years ago, or the version of yourself that still remembers feeling like not enough. The purchase works for 3 days. Then the baseline resets, slightly higher. The anxiety comes back louder. The signals worked perfectly. People believed them completely. The performance was convincing. The account balance just never got the message. Durable accumulators aren't cheap. They've just slowly, through some embarrassment usually, disconnected identity from consumption. That process costs things that aren't financial, and it never fully finishes. Some people only understand this after they embarrass themselves financially once, publicly sometimes, at least for the people I've seen. 4. They moved from selling time to building things that run without them. Income feels safe. It's legible. You worked, you got paid, the number confirms it. But income doesn't grow while you're not working. What grows is ownership, equity in something, a portfolio that has no memory of your labor, an audience built over 4 years that eventually becomes a distribution channel, then a business, content that earns long after it was made, systems that keep running after you stop pushing. The shift from how much do I make per hour to what percentage of my financial life works without me, that might be the single most underexplained transition in every serious wealth conversation. And it's rarely comfortable at the start, because in the early stages, it looks a lot like delusion. Most people don't arrive at this through reading about it. They arrive after watching someone else's asset do in 18 months what their salary couldn't in 7 years. In a coffee shop, on a late flight, somewhere a little inconvenient, a little isolating. The clearest lessons tend to arrive in the least cinematic settings. 5. They protect recovery the way most people think they should protect time. This is the one that sounds like rationalization until you've burned out at least once. Long game operators tend to be almost aggressive about sleep, about real silence on weekends, about not answering things Sunday night, about doing things that from outside look like a person who doesn't want it badly enough. The logic is precise, though. The mind is the asset. A degraded mind makes degraded decisions. And in investing, building, or negotiating, one decision made from exhaustion can erase months of careful accumulation. Not metaphorically, literally. 16-hour days often produce 8 hours of real output and 8 hours of expensive cognitive debt that shows up in the work later, in the judgment calls, in the things that need to be undone. The people who figured this out, usually after hitting a wall, now guard recovery like capital. They got there through experience, not theory. A lot of modern ambition is socially acceptable insecurity wearing a productivity costume, the busyness as proof, the visible grind as identity. People playing long games opt out of that performance early, and it costs them socially for a while. 6. They stopped needing to explain themselves, not from confidence mostly, from exhaustion. There's usually one specific conversation you could trace it back to, where someone playing a long game tried to explain what they were building to someone they cared about, and watch the other person's face go politely blank. Not hostile, just genuinely not available to the frame. After that happens enough times, something shifts. The ambition goes internal. The plan stops being announced. Progress stops being performed for people who can't see it yet. Some people are not financially trapped by bad luck or bad decisions. They're psychologically addicted to the performance of almost making it. The hustle content, the building something big narrative posted while the numbers stay flat. The feeling of momentum
without the actual compounding underneath it. That's a hard thing to say, but you can see it if you look. The durable builders go the other direction. They become less socially legible over time, less quotable, less present in conversations about ambition and success and what everyone's working on. Not because they stopped, because explaining a 10-year game to people measuring life by the weekend is exhausting. And after a while, most of them just stop. Some find that freeing. Some find it lonely. Some nights, genuinely, it's both. Wealth grows in seasons that look, from the outside, like nothing is happening. The psychological cost of surviving those seasons intact, that's almost never part of the story people tell later.
7. They stay genuinely curious about how things actually work. Not courses, not productivity systems, not the performance of learning. Just a low-level, persistent interest in mechanisms. How incentives distort behavior inside organizations over time. How industries misprice things before the correction becomes obvious to everyone. How information moves through a market before it's technically information. How deals get structured versus how they get described afterward. Over 10 years, this creates something that looks like intuition, but it's pattern recognition, built from actual attention paid over a long time. Nothing mysterious about it. The strange part is it mostly happens in settings that don't make good content. A flight nobody photographed, 6 a.m. before anyone's awake, the margins of days that look empty from the outside. That's where a lot of the real compounding happens. And even then, even people who understand these dynamics still make emotional decisions sometimes.
Still drift. Still lose months to things that didn't matter. The knowledge doesn't make you immune, not even close. Luck plays a role. The honest operators, the ones willing to say it, usually in private, will tell you timing helped in ways they didn't control. A relationship opened a door too early. A market moved in the right direction before they understood what they were doing. But behavior shapes how much of the opportunity you can hold when it arrives, how far it travels. Some people realize they've been running the wrong patterns for a decade, way too late. The apartment looks right, the title sounds right. Somewhere around 42, 43, the numbers just don't add up anymore. And that specific reckoning, the gap between what was performed and what was built, is almost impossible to describe to someone who hasn't been close to it. And here's the thing nobody puts in the wealth content. Running these patterns costs things that aren't financial. Relationships that drifted because the frame rates were too different. Presence that went somewhere else. The ordinary texture of a life not always pointed 10 years forward. Financially successful people are still anxious, still irrational sometimes, still emotionally messy in ways the outside doesn't show. The behaviors described here aren't a path to psychological peace. They're just a different set of trade-offs. That part usually gets left out.
All 7 of these have something in common. None of them feel like winning while they're happening. Protecting attention feels like missing out. Staying flat about money feels like being less alive. Not buying the thing feels like deprivation. Building something invisible feels, on the worst days, like delusion with a business plan attached. Compounding always feels like nothing, until it doesn't. And then one day, the gap is there, real. And the people on either side of it often can't fully explain how it opened, because the behaviors that created it were too unremarkable to notice while they were running. That's the mechanism. Not intelligence, not access, not character people were born with.
Small behavioral differences running in the background of ordinary weeks for longer than ever felt reasonable.
The question worth sitting with isn't whether you recognize these patterns. It's which ones are already running in your life right now, in an unremarkable week, when nothing feels important and the gap is still invisible. Because that's where it's already compounding, in both directions, whether you're paying attention or not.